I'll ask Tony if she could please call roll.
Jimenez,
Present.
Peralez,
Here.
Dieppe,
Present.
Roscoe,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
Esparza,
Here.
Arenas,
Here.
Foley,
Here.
Camus,
Here.
Jones, Mayor Liccardo.
Present. Just as we kick back into council discussion, I just want to again extend a thank you to Mark Vanny and to Ed and the city attorney team. It's obvious a lot of work's had to happen in a very short period of time. And I know there will be some sense that some of that work was for naught. I can assure you, Mark, all these items are coming back up, campaign finance and otherwise. So I suspect that the drafting you did will be resuscitated eventually once this gets through a commission and so forth. So thank you for putting in the work now and doing so in a timely way in order for us to be able to make the decisions we need to make to get decide what moves forward to the ballot. Councilmember Foley.
Whoops, thank you. Now I'll stay on camera for my comments and then shut off, I think. I'm fading a little bit. I really appreciate that this issue is coming back and the way that it is coming back to us as well, that the process is being hopefully if it gets approved today, and I'm hopeful that it will, that it goes forward to a blue ribbon panel or a commission or whatever we're calling it for investigation into what is the best form of government that this city should be implementing if a change is necessary at all. I am very mindful of the vote that I made 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I made it in good conscience and with the understanding of that taking this to the vote of the public was the way to go. But in the last few weeks, having thought about it personally, I've actually been out of touch with email with my recovery. It's been wrestling with me that this process does seem tremendously rushed, and I'm so glad for the memos that we have, both from the council members and from the mayor, vice mayor, all of the memos coming together, and hopefully we can get some consensus on this, and it seems that we're heading in that direction. That is extremely important. We have been criticized for 6-5 votes continuously, and I don't think any of us find any joy in that sort of dissension in our city council. We all have at heart doing the best that we possibly can for the city of San Jose. However we interpret that through our lens and through the areas and communities that we represent. But ultimately, we represent every member in the city of San Jose. So our job is to make the decisions that we can that will benefit the majority of our population, of our residents within the city of San Jose. So I'm really happy and pleased to see the motion coming through, the memos, and all of the thoughtfulness that was created around them. And there are 2 items that I'm wondering if we can maybe pull them off and bifurcate them. So I'll speak to Council Member Arenas to see if she agrees to bifurcate them. And the 2 items are items number 2 and 5 from your memo. And the reason is it's actually personal preference for me. I'm fading physically, and I want to be able to vote on the majority of what else is being discussed. And I think those 2 will have continued discussion in the next few hours, and I don't know how many hours we will be discussing those 2. But would the council member consider separating those 2 items, 2 and 5, for a future vote and a future vote today, and allow us to vote on the rest of the memos that have come forward? Because I'd like to be here to vote for them, and I'm not sure I'll make it in 2 hours or so.
So how would that work, Mayor, since the remaining item, so that would trifurcate
Yes.
instead of bifurcate?
So I think the way it would work is we would consider the bulk of your motion first, presumably, take any comments on that from the council, vote on that, and then go in whichever order to number 2 and number 5.
I would really appreciate that. It's not that I don't want to discuss and vote on them. I just want to be counted for sure on the one vote, and whether I can or cannot make it, I will do what I can. But as the day goes on, I've found that in my recovery, as the day goes on, I find start to get really tired. And I can feel that coming back from lunch that I'm starting to get really tired. And Councilmember Arenas, I'd really like to support what you've put forward already.
I appreciate that, Councilmember Foley. I certainly understand that. I've actually had myself some medical issues that I've gone into the ER for this month, and so I totally get that. I don't want to leave you out of the rest of the conversation. I'm not sure if whose remains to in terms of talking. I only see one more person that's going to speak, and that's Maya. So I wonder if that comment is pretty quick, we might be able to vote on all of this and get you back into bed.
Very good. That's fine. But if you, I'm just going to throw it out there. If this looks like it's going on longer, would you consider separating those items? Because I definitely want to be here to vote for the bulk of your memo.
Absolutely.
And the other memos.
Absolutely, Councilmember Foley. And it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, but it sounds like we might be closer than not. I think that I heard you say that you were, I think with the exception of number 5, you had some feedback there, but I think that I may be able to earn your support on this.
There are several other issues I'd like to discuss. I haven't really spoken to the whole memo.
Okay, great. I just want to point out that I think all of your items on your memo, Mayor, have been incorporated into this, and I really like the message about unity, and so I hope that it continues forward. Thank you.
Incorporated in the motion. That's the motion as I understand it. It excludes my entire memorandum.
No, it does not. It includes your, sorry.
Mayor, I thought it included 1, A, B, and C. And then I thought Councilmember Esparza added in 2A.
Yeah, and I think B through F it's channeled through the city charter. The San Jose FPPC Commission for consideration. And so I think all of those items have been actually, there's a path forward for all of your items on your memo.
And number 3 is included as well.
Councilmember Foley has the floor.
Okay, so so I guess that's a no to the bifurcation. Although now I see 2 other council members coming forward, so it's not appropriate for me to make a motion to that effect right now, is it? Or
Ed, what would be the process if someone would want to make a motion to bifurcate? You're actually on mute right now, Ed.
It would have to be an amendment to the substitute motion, and the way it has.
So there'd be no way to make a procedural motion independent of a friendly amendment.
No.
okay,
Okay, got it.
all right. Thank you.
Okay.
Then that's all I have to say, but I hope we can move forward thoughtfully.
Thank you. Councilmember Esparza?
Thank you. In the spirit of Councilmember Foley's unity message, I will try to stick to the Foley rule and keep it short. I wanted to do a couple of things. So one is, this council has voted numerous times to reform the planning commission. And we did vote fairly recently to put this on the ballot. And so we need to remember that commitment. I actually feel that the planning commission should go with redistricting because we had also talked about following the redistricting guidelines for the planning commission by using that process. I know Rick Doyle isn't here, but he was part of that discussion when this item came to council. He helped us kind of go through the steps on how to fold in planning commission into redistricting. And so I feel like that is a natural combination. And so one, I wanted to do that. The other thing is I wanted to follow up on the discussions around the 2-year term or on the 2 or 6 year term. As I stated earlier, I strongly feel that this, since we're talking about democracy, I think we have heard from our residents for the past couple of months pretty strongly about their desire for democracy. And I think we need to honor that and honor an election. And if I remember correctly, on July 1st, maybe it was both the 30th and the 1st, the mayor stated that it wasn't about him, that, he wasn't about him, wanting an extra 2 years, that this was about really good government. And so I wanted to ask the mayor, I wanted to ask you directly about the 2-year term. And so do you have a problem with running in 2022 for a 2-year term if that was something that the council would make an opportunity to create a 2-year election?
What I said a month ago when we had this discussion is that I believe a 2-year term would be a mistake, that if there's going to be an extension of the next mayor's term to 6 years or extension this term to 6 years, that would make sense from a governance standpoint. I would not want to put anyone in the position where they're running for mayor, they win election and they're running again for mayor, literally months after the election. I think that creates a very bad, and I think it's just bad for governance. So I think a 2-year term is the least desirable option, in my view. Now,
So-
there are other options, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
So you would not run for a 2-year term if that were offered today?
I'm not even thinking about it. I'm not talking, it's not the issue for us to discuss today. The question is what's in the best interest of the city? And whatever I would decide or not is irrelevant. I think it is bad for the city to have a 2-year term where someone would get elected. And if any of you are familiar with mayoral elections, you have some idea of what is required. And Councilmember Crosco talked in great detail about the independent expenditures that come in rates. I believe I had somewhere near $1.5 million or $2 million of independent expenditures come in against me in my mayoral election in 2014, which meant I had to go raise money to try to win. And that's not what you want a mayor doing for the first 2 years of their term. You want a mayor focused on the priorities of the city. So I think it's a bad idea to have a 2-year term for any mayor. And I told you I'm agnostic about how it all gets vetted out. If the view of the council is that, look, we're going to have an election anyway in 2022, my sense would be, okay, then let's let the commission decide how that 2 years gets allocated. And we'll go to the commission and they'll decide in 2022. There's clearly a consensus, or not consensus, but certainly a strong majority on the council to put a measure on the ballot changing the election year. I'm happy to support that in 2022. And we'll let the commission have a public discussion about how best to allocate the remaining 2 years. And one thing will be certain is I won't be the beneficiary of those 2 years because I'll be out of office. So I'd be happy to support something like that, that ensures we have a truly public process about who gets the 2 years. And one thing will be certain is I won't be the beneficiary, and I'd be happy to vote for that.
Okay, I'm a little surprised because I'm looking for where in your memo you said you were agnostic about the 2 years.
No, I'm agnostic
And that
about
is
who
part of what
gets-
we need to decide today.
No, I said I'm agnostic as to who gets the 2 years and which term
Okay.
and how it's applied. But I think a 2-year term is a bad idea in terms of governance. And particularly given what we know the city's going to face in a few years ahead, this recession is going to last. It's going to be a deep and long recession. And that's not a time of turmoil where you want to have what I know are inevitably divisive mayoral elections that split a community and then have a mayor thinking constantly for the first year that they're in office about how whatever they have to do to win re-election.
Sure, I mean, I get that, and we certainly see 2-year elections in Congress. We see that in the Assembly, but we do need to decide that today, whether it's a 2-year term or a 6-year term. So that is a decision for this council today.
Yeah,
And
I don't know
so-
a political scientist who doesn't believe the 2-year term in Congress is a horrible way to govern.
Well, I mean, nonetheless, that's for us to decide today, whether it's a
Yeah.
2-year term or a 6-year term.
Right.
And so,
The community, Councilmember Esparza, I'd encourage you to think about that. It could be.
well,
a
it's for
decision
us,
the
it's for us
community.
to decide what goes on the ballot. Of course, this is about the community. That's what we've been talking about and imploring our colleagues to support and
Well,
listen
if
to
it's
the
for us,
community
I would on the
pass,
ballot.
for the past couple of
different.
months. And so, so I am actually kind of giving my feedback to city staff, which they asked for today. And so that is my feedback to city staff based on my thoughts, as well as on the community input that we've received for 2 months from hundreds of people who took the time to send us emails, as well as messages on social media and whatnot. And as well, in addition to the Black Kitchen Cabinet, the Asian Law Alliance, and other organizations that did not want to extend the current term. So that is something that we need to figure out today. And that is my feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't recall them opining on the issue of a 6-year term for the next mayor or on the issue of whether or not the community should decide ultimately through a community process.
They opposed the extension. I have correspondence from them.
That's a
and
very
they oppose the
narrow-
extension.
Yes, Councilmember Esparza, you're not saying anything different than what I just said. They did not weigh in specifically about the other issues. Councilmember Kemmis?
Mayor, I merely wanted to ask what we're voting on right now. I'm hearing bifurcate and trifurcate and
Yeah, there's no bifurcation. That was declined by the maker of the motion.
but what we're voting on in a nutshell is the mayoral cycle moving to 2020 and forming the blue ribbon. I tried to write this thing down so I know what I'm voting on because there's about 4 memos with each one has 5 parts at least. So we're mayoral 2020, blue ribbon task force, and the charter amendment for the planning commission. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, not quite.
And we're leaving the question whether we're extending your term or doing a 6-year election to a later vote. Is that what's happening right now, or?
No, I believe what Councilmember Aranis's motion has not yet decided whether there would be a 2-year term starting in 2022 or a 6-year term for the next mayor in 2022. That I believe is undecided. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Councilmember Aranis. Okay, that's the current. And the motion is that there would be a mayoral election in 2022. The presumption then there would be a presidential year alignment thereafter, either in 2024 or in 2028, depending on what the council decides with regard to the duration of that term.
Right, but that hasn't been decided. So the only thing that we're voting on is moving the mayoral election.
Well, ultimately, it's going to have to be decided today because I don't think.
Right. Yeah, I'm okay with the way it's currently. I'm actually really okay with the way it's currently being decided. I'd rather vote, and I would rather vote on this extension of the mayor separately than moving the mayoral election, because I've had issues with moving the mayoral election cycle since day one. The reason why I thought I'd support the grand bargain. I thought the unions were on board, and I was planning on supporting, obviously a couple weeks ago, what I thought was a compromise. That being said, I'm not really in favor of changing the mayoral cycle. That this has never been an easier time to vote in in Santa Clara County. Everybody gets a mail-in ballot, and they have almost a month, and they could choose to mail it in for free. They could go into numerous sites. It's never been easier, and there's never, for me, it's about making sure, if we're concerned about turnout, we just have to do a better job motivating people to turn out. So I'm not necessarily willing to support the motion on the floor, but I do care about what happens. I would support the extension of this mayor. I think it would be a good idea to have some continuity, especially in the rough times that are coming. So I'm glad that I'm hoping that we can continue bifurcating this. I can vote no on one and potentially yes on the other. So like I said, I'm waiting for a clear motion to clarify this motion. So just to understand completely what we're voting on right now.
Okay, well, I think it'll come back to the maker of the motion to clarify as to whether it's a 2 or 6 year term for the next mayoral election. So we'll come back to that issue. Anything further, Councilmember Camus?
I just wanted to, can we vote on what we're talking about now, the mayoral cycle in 2020 and the Blue Ribbon Task Force, things that we have that many of you have agreed upon?
I think that was a request essentially, Councilmember Foley.
Okay.
So I believe that's been asked and answered, but Councilmember Reyes, let me know if I'm incorrect on that. Okay, that's correct. Okay, Councilmember Davis?
I have a question. I don't know, Mark, if it's for you or Ed. I don't see Mark anymore. Sorry, he's not on my computer on the screen. But oh, there you are. I see you now. If we didn't want to make the decision today about whether or not to move the mayoral election, could the commission, actually the Blue Ribbon Task Force or the Charter Change Commission or Charter Revision Commission, could they make that determination and give us, do we have to put something on the ballot to get a Charter Revision Commission started?
No, you don't need to put something on the ballot to get a Charter Revision Commission started. If the desire is to move the mayoral elections, that will require a charter amendment. And so there's only a few opportunities to do a charter amendment. You have to do it either at a statewide general election in November or a primary election in March. And that's if it doesn't affect any labor and employment issues. Those have to go in November elections. So there are a limited window of time to move the mayoral election and to put it to the voters.
So the decision to move the mayoral election and which mayor's race has a 6-year term or whether it has a 2-year term, is that a decision that could be made by the Charter Revision Commission that would not need to be made by us?
I think what Mark is saying, the next cycle would be March or whatever the primary would be in 2022.
Right.
And if nothing happened or you couldn't come to a consensus, or it would be difficult for people to know what it is they would be running for unless you had a definitive answer before the primary in 2022. So while it may be possible, it would be very difficult to let people know what was happening. So it would be better, it doesn't have to be, but it would be better to make a decision today.
Okay, so if we
Or
decide
it could be the 4th,
today,
August 4th, I'm sorry.
yeah, but so that means if we decide today to move the mayoral election to align with the presidential election, then I'm just trying to make sure I completely understand. Then we also must make the determination about whether to extend the current mayor's term. That goes to the ballot. People can decide.
Yeah.
Right? As part of the measure,
Correct.
it will say move the next mayoral election to 2024, or it will say and extend the current mayor's term, for example, or it will say have the next mayoral election in 2022 and have it be a 6-year term to better align with the presidential election years in 2028. Right?
Yes.
So that's what we're looking at in this particular part of the.
Right, the combination of extending this current mayor or this current office holder, adding it to the next office holder, or as I'm hearing, which I think is possible, but may be difficult to do, is to wait until 2022 for a 2-year term. You could actually put a 2-year term now as well. But again, there are issues with a 2-year term, but those are all the options, yes.
Right, okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. I just want to make sure we were all kind of aware of what the options are. It would push out the decision if we wanted the public to weigh in on that issue as well, right? As part of the Charter Revision Commission.
Right, and you have to make certain that they do it in time for you to be able to consider it, so that whoever is thinking of running for the 2022 position, if that's what it is, or for the next year, they'd understand what they were doing in 2022.
Right. So it may or may not be clear by the time, well, you could have it during the, you could have that be during the primary. So everyone who is running would know it would be up in the air at that time in 2022. And however it was decided would be for the runoff. It would have been decided in March for the November runoff.
Well, I mean,
right?
It's all possible. It's just a question of what you're really telling people you're doing when you're running, and what the public understands is the actual term of that person running.
Okay.
Which is why it would be better to decide by August the 4th, so that the public understands what they're voting for.
Yeah.
And anyone running will understand what he or she will be running for.
Yep. I completely agree. And I think it makes sense to do it now. I just wanted to explore the option because we hadn't talked about that. And there was a lot of talk about the need for public comment and the need for public input, which I completely agree with, for the Charter Revision Commission, or whatever we're calling it. I like that name better than Blue Ribbon Task Force, just because it's very specific about what their job is. There have been Blue Ribbon task forces on education and a number of other things in many, many presidential administrations, and we don't really know what those do. A Charter Revision Commission, we know what it does. They are there to help us revise the charter. So I am very glad. I hope we all got some time in the last 3 weeks to take a break, to spend time with our families, and to reflect on the last 3 weeks on what happened on June 30th and July 1st. I know I did. And I am very relieved that we are at a point now where we are willing to listen to each other better, willing to have a more civil discourse, frankly, than we had on June 30th and July 1st. And I know we are all passionate. We would not be in these positions if we weren't. And I do think being on the screen and being in my garage, as opposed to sitting next to Councilmember Arenas and Councilmember Carrasco, is very difficult. Just to be able to, have lunch or dinner with you guys and to ask about your families and to have discussions about things that are completely unrelated to this. I think it's made our conversations here on screen more difficult and frankly more fraught. And I don't enjoy that. And I very much blame the pandemic for that. Because even though we don't always agree, we have, especially, Councilmember Arenas, you and I have said many times that even though we don't agree, we're both moms, we both have a son and a daughter, we've got way more in common than we disagree on. And so I'm heartened today by our more rested and cooler heads and our conversation thus far. So as I was listening to my colleagues and as I was reading my colleagues' memos, and I think it's very clear in the motion how many similarities there are amongst all of the memos. So the only outstanding issues are what we do with the term and how many ballot measures we have. I really think those are the only 2 points of contention. What I've been thinking about is I really think that when I go forward into what are we talking about for the charter revision and what we just talked about with the city attorneys, I would be much more comfortable as a voter, just a regular person, voting on sort of one thing at a time, which I know is not possible in terms of, the mayoral election and the redistricting commission or whatever, or what's our other item, the IPA reforms, those kinds of things. We can't necessarily segregate all of those. But the next mayor's race, so assuming we go forward today and we say we're going to do a redistricting commission, and the timeline that we're on is to bring the redistricting or the charter revision commission to have something to come back to the voters in 2022, then we're meshing together the 2022 mayoral election, whether it's 2-year term or a 6-year term or whatever, we're meshing that together with the new changes. So we won't be able to have a good discussion about who's running for mayor, separated from the fact, from the question of what does the mayor's office look like? Potentially, right? If the Charter Revision Commission comes back and says we should make these changes. So I'm concerned about that. Because as we said, we don't want, there's concern about, whether the personality of the mayor is tied up in what powers the mayor gets. But if we separate this out, and by doing that, all we're doing is saying Sam gets 2 more years so that we can have this discussion about this other thing that will go in place, that will become, a new office of mayor after Sam's done. So then we take out the personality of Sam or whoever's running for mayor in 2022. We just take all of that out so that people can think about the form of government. That's why I support extending the current term, so that we can actually get to these more substantive questions about form of government without worrying about and who's gonna take that mantle right away. So that there's time, and I'm also thinking of city staff and how concerned they obviously were. There were some public comment on June 30th by city staff. I'm sure all of you over the course of the month have heard from the staff members that you are more frequently working with, and you may have asked them. I talked to a couple myself, and there's just concern about what does this look like. Let's give ourselves and our city a chance to actually discuss it without the conversation of, and who's running for mayor too. Because I think those things they're gonna get tangled up. So that's my preference. And then in terms of the ballot measures themselves, I know we've talked about the changing the planning commission, and I also like to clarify that question with the city attorney's office. Did we gave specific direction? Remind me, please. Did we give specific direction to increase the number of seats and to make that 11 members in the planning commission and to have them be specifically by district?
There was a discussion a couple of council meetings ago. Rick was here. I was also listening where Councilmember Esparza was discussing the possibility of expanding the planning commission members in number. There was some discussion as to whether or not it was appropriate, whether there should be a readjustment of the 7 areas represented by the current members. My recollection of it, which is why we included it in here in that manner, was that Councilmember Esparza indicated that if there was going to be another ballot measure, that her proposal be included to come back to council as a possible ballot measure. And since there was other ballot measures, we included it here for the council's further discussion to make certain that the council was still interested in placing the change to the commission from 7 to 11.
Okay, thank you.
Can I interject for a second? Just a quick question on that to clarify. Did we vote on that? Because forgive me, it was a long 2-day session. I don't even know.
It was included in a motion that Councilmember Esparza made that day for us to come back to the council as part of a motion that the council approved.
Okay, so the council approved a motion with it in it.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I want to clarify. Thanks,
Yes.
Councilmember
So
Davis.
we
Sorry.
decided to come back with it because we wanted to make sure that this was what the council wanted. Now that there were other ballot measures, to make certain that the council was still wanting to consider that as an additional ballot measure.
I see. Okay, sorry, Councilmember Davis.
Point of clarification, I'm sorry, but the actual motion was to put it on the ballot and to come back.
I don't think there's been an actual decision by any of us to put anything on the ballot until August 4th.
Previously, yeah, correct. So when the planning commission item, the motion was if there was another city initiated item to then put this on the ballot.
Okay, Councilmember Davis?
Thank you. So as we are reconsidering what we talked about on June 30th and July 1st, I think that bears reconsideration now. I agree the card room measure is its own measure. I think the IPA measure is its own measure. In terms of the timelines, I think we should go for option 2 for the redistricting commission. I've already stated my preferences for the mayoral election. I'm happy to move it to the presidential election cycle, although frankly, I don't think I agree with Councilmember Kemmis. I don't think we know yet what the turnout will be citywide in a presidential election year for a mayoral election. And in terms of an off year, 2022, when we have all mail-in ballots as well. So I'm sort of agnostic on that point, but if we move the mayoral election, I think it's important to extend the term of the current mayor, again, because we're going to be talking about this other charter revision stuff. Basically, I think of it as in lieu of a mayoral election, we will talk about the charter revision stuff in 2022. And then in terms of the planning commission, I mean, the way that I look at the planning commission, I kind of think, you know, if we're trying to make it less political and more representative, having seven districts that are sort of asynchronous from our council districts is the way to do that. And we don't have to change the charter to do that. We could just give the redistricting commission additional authority, right? And that to me, first of all, right now, the planning commission is not, we have some guidelines that we just put in place in the last year or so about, well, I think we just put them in place for how many planning commissioners can be from one district, but we hadn't before that really had any guidelines about having planning commissioners be from across the city. And I think it is very good for planning commissioners to the sitting planning commissioners to have different perspectives, geographically diverse included, with other diversity and, being diversity factors being included as well. I was trying to think of the term. But anyway, I think, we should take gender and race and geography into account when we're talking about who's going on the planning commission. That's hard to do if each of us is making our own appointment to that, as opposed to having to have the discussion as we currently do on council. I think there's value in that. And I think we have made a better planning commission through having those discussions. So I would prefer actually to leave the planning commission at the size it is right now, so we don't have to deal with it in terms of the ballot measure, and to put that geographical requirement onto the redistricting commission's plate, at which point it won't be a 1-to-1 ratio. And so we won't be appointing, and we can even tell them, right? Like every single boundary has to include more than one council district, every single planning commissioner. That way we really make sure nobody appoints no one council member appoints somebody. So those are my thoughts in terms of kind of how we should move forward. And again, I'm just trying to think about the timing of these things, the spacing of these things, and also knowing, as we've discussed, ballot measures get very hard to understand, and they get very complex when they have too many items. So I'm thinking about that, and then being very mindful that we budgeted $2.7 million for ballot measures. We're already talking about adding an extra one, and we haven't gotten the sales tax numbers in yet, and we're going to be having, probably within the next 4 weeks, I'm sure, Dave, we'll be having a discussion again about what the economy is like, what our budget is likely to really look like, and to be making some very hard decisions. So I don't want to throw out, another, $629,000 more than we have to, if there is another way for us to get our same result. As Councilmember Arenas said, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and how do we best solve it? I love that. So that's what I'm thinking in terms of putting the mayoral election together, and then the option 2 for the redistricting commission. And basically kind of the subset is, and we will direct the redistricting commission to change the way the planning commission is, applications are received and allocated.
Thank you, Councilmember Davis. Just to clarify, option 2 on the redistricting would be the option that would allow the city simply to, by ordinance, set a new date to have the flexibility to deal with the changes in the census. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So it was, as Mark stated, option 2 was to authorize the change by ordinance if the census results are ever late. So it's not just specific to this time. And I think it also, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, that option 2 doesn't say a certain number of days.
No, if it was just to defer to ordinance, then it would be up to the council to decide what the deadlines are by ordinance.
Right.
Yeah, no, I support that as well. I also believe that districting, it'd be the important thing to do with regard to planning commission representativeness. The important thing is that we have fair distribution of those representatives, whether it's 7, 11, or 21. I think it's much less relevant. Councilmember Carrasco.
Thank you. I'm gonna make my comments brief, because I'm a little lost as to what we're voting on now, and I'm trying to just get some clarification on the motion that Councilmember Arenas has put forward. If we could just be really clear, please, for my very slow brain, because I'm in a house, by the way, that has absolutely no air conditioning, and it's really hot up here close to the hills. So unlike some of you that might enjoy some air conditioning, I'm a little pissy right now. So if you could help me out, please.
Tony actually has this in writing, I'm told. Tony, do you want to put it up on? the
You have
board?
it in writing?
Yeah.
So I can take a
Hopefully
picture.
it'll
of it?
help everybody. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
So let's give everybody a chance to read.
Son, go make your bed.
This is also a good time to tell me if I've got something incorrect.
Diego.
Okay, Councilmember Carrasco?
Okay, thank you for that, Tony. So I'm just gonna throw out a couple of my own thoughts in terms of 2 years, 6 years extension, what have you. I know that it's not a perfect formula and it's not a perfect recipe for the chocolate chip cookie that we're all salivating over. The 2 years, as I see it, is a one-time, not a perfect and not an ideal situation. I get that. It's a one-time situation that would align us if the voters were to pass it. Obviously, we've done polling, others have done polling, it polls very well. And it gives us the kind of turnout that we're hoping we'll get, so that more people are engaged, women, people of color, and it represents the diversity that we have in the city of San Jose, so that we have greater representation, and so that the individual who holds that office is actually chosen by the people that live here in the city. And we have seen in other cities where it has been aligned with the presidential election, that the turnout has increased exponentially.
Và nó làm cho chúng ta có tăng trưởng rất.
Okay, I think you still have the floor, Councilmember Carrasco.
And I know that the 2 years, again, is not ideal, and as it's been already reflected upon. We have other offices, with a greater challenges that do it every 2 years. I think it's a horrible setup as well, but they do it every 2 years for whatever lifetime they choose to be in that office. This will be a one-time, just in order to align that office. I'm okay with the 2 years. I would prefer the 2 years only because, Mayor, off the dais, we've had a great relationship, but we were all voted in at the same time, and we made a commitment to the voters to do our 8 years, and that was our commitment to them. And so, and so again, we're on borrowed time in a borrowed seat with a great faith from the voters that voted us in, and we have a commitment to them, and our time is up in just a few years. So that's my 2 cents. And so I appreciate a lot of the comments that have been made today. I appreciate the comments that were made just by Councilmember Davis. Unfortunately, Councilmember Davis, over the past several weeks, I haven't had much of a break because I've been called to come in and talk on this item for many different reasons. So I haven't had a day off. I'm very tired. I'm sitting in a house with no air conditioning. I'm a little pissy right now because I'm not very comfortable. I happen to be sitting in a district that has many challenges. And I realized I had an aha moment by the way, an epiphany, if you will, that sometimes they say that East Siders have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. And I think that I really have developed that chip on my shoulder. And one of the reasons is because we're constantly having to fight and advocate for our community and for the underinvestments in this district, and for people and for children especially, who sometimes don't have a future. And that's the reason why I didn't take a day off in July, because I had to make sure that individuals understood what this backroom deal meant, and why we had to at least be very honest with individuals as to how this came about, why it came about, and what the implications and consequences were going to mean for the residents of the city of San Jose. So I didn't take a day off, and I'm a little, I'm not as rested as some individuals are on the city council this morning. And so in terms of bifurcating, you know, I have to say, I'm kind of flabbergasted and kind of taken aback that anybody here on the council today would request of the maker of the motion to have this motion bifurcated, when we pleaded with all of you to have the motion bifurcated so that we could vote on an issue that was so important to us, such as the fair elections initiative, and you all just adamantly denied us that right to represent our residents on something so important. You just flat out denied us the courtesy. It was a courtesy, and you just flat out denied it. And now you're asking us of that. And so shame on you again for asking us to extend that professional courtesy. And thank you, Councilmember Arenas, for even considering it. Obviously it's her choice, but I'm just amazed and surprised and just bewildered that you would still ask with such humility for that kind of extension. And, you know, if she grants it, that's great. I'll go ahead and support it as well. But I hope that you will extend us that kind of courtesy in the future, even though we may have a division, a divide, and a difference in our political and philosophical differences, and that we don't have these kind of little power plays at the dais in the future when some things are that important to each and every one of us. Because I think that we've always granted all of you the courtesy of bifurcating a vote when it's been that important to you. I don't think it's ever been denied, especially to Councilmember Johnny Camas. You have voted repeatedly on things that were really important to you. And when you've bifurcated and you've asked us, we have never denied it, never. But you denied it to us just a month ago. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Prowse.
Yeah, thank you. Try to see if we can get to some consensus here based on what I've been hearing. I know that there was some understanding on your part, Mayor, that your memorandum was completely excluded, but I think we've cleared that up, unless you're still thinking that there's, I guess, parts of your memo that are not included. Is that your understanding still?
There are parts of my memo that are included. That's true.
No. I'm asking, are you still under the impression that there are parts of your memo that are not included?
Yes, but that's fine. This is part of the process.
Okay, because my understanding was that everything was included. So what parts of it do you believe are not included? Because maybe I'm not understanding directly what we have on the table.
Sure. So my understanding is, going back to the memorandum, that portions 2, B, C, and D are not going to the Charter Commission. My understanding is, I believe 2A was not explicitly included, but is somehow implicitly wrapped up in 2A for Vice Mayor Jones. And I'm not sure it really matters at this point. I think we all see what the motion is from Tony's display. So I'm not sure what my understanding it matters. I think the important thing is whether we all understand what it is.
Yeah, I think that the collective understanding is what I'm trying to get to as well. And so I wanted to try to see if you could help point out what things I think maybe I thought were there and you think aren't. And so my understanding then, I would agree with you on your memo of 2A that it seemed very much as a directive that says, hey, we will return to place this on a ballot measure versus the language that we now have is that, that's going to be what is looked at, but that there's no sort of expectation that we return in November 2022 with something on the ballot, that we sort of leave that up to the Charter Review Commission,
Right.
which I believe is that's what you always intended, but my understanding is that's what the language sort of directs now. I actually thought the discussion was around.
Actually, what I wrote is what I intended.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
you expect then the Charter Revision Commission to come back November 2022 with aligning the mayoral authority, with residents, local business, reasonable, as your 2A describes. So you expect them to come back.
To align the mayoral authority with the expectations of our residents for responsible and accountable democratic governance. Yes, that was my desire.
Okay, you don't wish them to make up that decision on their own, what should, or if anything should come back in November 2022?
Well, the idea is that those words I described are very broad, right? They don't prescribe a specific solution. The idea would be they would interpret those words within the context of their experience with whatever they learned through the dialogue in the commission, public input, and return with something that aligns mayoral authority with the reasonable expectations of our residents and our local businesses, and put that on the ballot.
I guess what's left out though is it's also possible that the Charter Revision Commission comes back with a recommendation that they don't think we should put anything on the ballot. And
could.
are you saying that that's not acceptable?
No, they could decide that the reasonable expectations are exactly what exists today and then not return anything. But the important thing is that we give them a charge. That is, they have a direction. It's not, let's go have a bunch of commission meetings and have a free-for-all about any idea that comes to mind. That's not usually a good use of time for very busy people that we expect will be appointing to this. Generally, they want to have some clear sense of what is it the council is expecting out of us. Now, first of all, they don't have to return anything that I like or not, and we don't have to put whatever they put out on the ballot either. That's ultimately a decision of the council. But to give them some sense of direction is important, it seems to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there was just, there was language that was missing there that wasn't clear. And it sounds like actually that's where the discrepancies were coming from, that we had sort of a back and forth from a couple of our colleagues that were trying to get to the bottom of that based on the language that you had crafted. And I think that we did get to the bottom of it that says, look, we may come back with a recommendation, we may not. And we have included the fact that we explicitly do want them to look at the language that you have crafted. I'm not against that either. I think that we should say, hey, what things do we want you to actually look at? So I'm comfortable with that. If that's not, if that doesn't sound clear to you, I'm happy to try to make an amendment to make that clear. So let me put that on the shelf for a second, and you can answer that in a moment. 2B, C, and D from your memo, my understanding was that we would ask our, I'm blanking on the name, but the FPPC commission to take a look at that. So is that?
And that's fine. I think the idea would be if we're going to amend the charter for it, that it could come back to the charter commission. That would be my desire.
Okay, I mean, again, I'm kind of, I guess, using the agnostic word. I'm agnostic on which commission might look at that. I think that our pre-existing commission is probably, has a better nexus, to speak of nexuses, right? It has a better nexus to look at that. So I was comfortable with that. I thought that was the conversation that we had. And I think based on looking at Tony's verbiage, I don't see that you're correct in the motion. So I'm comfortable to add that and then maybe clarify your language to make it very clear that, we could find a consensus, at least on these points, and then sort of move on to the one remaining item that we don't have.
And I have no objection to the FCPP weighing in and reviewing and offering their view. The idea is if there's going to be a charter review commission and we're considering amending the charter, then this should be on there. Agenda.
So your thought would be then two, maybe both bodies look at it then? Both commissions?
Yes.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that as well. And then lastly, I think you had some contention with what I had already described, which was the recommendation number 5, this idea of what initiatives, what ballot initiatives do we actually come back with? And as I mentioned in my comments, I'm sort of, I was comfortable with, we combine them with the IPA reforms, but I did agree that I don't think there's a direct nexus there. I'm also comfortable with adding them on, and this would be adding them onto the initiative on moving the mayor's race. I'm comfortable with that as well. So I think I'll see if the maker of the motion here, what her thoughts are, because I would be willing to accept it as the seconder, a couple things here. So number 1, I'd be willing to accept removing item or recommendation 5 from Councilmember Arenas' memo and not requiring the redistricting or the planning commission initiatives to be bundled with the IPA reforms, rather allowing them to be combined with moving the mayor's race. And then in regards to item 2B, C, and D from the mayor's memo, allowing both commissions to review those issues, to provide feedback, knowing that they have implications in the changes we may be taking in the charter. Those would be the friendly amendments, which I'm the seconder, so I just kind of want to hear from the maker of the motion.
Thank you, Councilmember. This is, even though we started out with a different note here, and I think some of my colleagues have already mentioned that we are listening to one another a lot more than we did last time. It sounds like, and somebody's already referred to that they think they see what the vote is already. What I'm interested in understanding is if we start accepting more of this, of people's different, specifically the mayor's B through D, is that going to get us where we need to, is that going to earn us your support, Mayor, is ultimately what I'm interested in.
There's several issues that I've raised, so happy to talk about all those issues. But
Right,
I think I've had an honest conversation here with Councilmember Pross about where we have some differences, and yes, those are issues that would help.
So if those issues are addressed, and it would help, I just don't want it to be another false lead, if you will, in terms of getting to unity. And I will.
I guess then I'd say don't feel like you're taking the bait. I've told you I've got several concerns, and those are only a few of them.
All right, so I'd like to first hear the remaining concerns, Councilmember Perales, before I accept any additional amendments.
Yeah, that's fine. And I thought, at least looking at your memorandum, Mayor, I think I'm not understanding where your additional concerns may be. Happy to hear what those are as well, if you're willing to share that rather than sort of just allude to the fact that there are concerns.
Sure.
Mayor, before you begin, I just have a point of order.
Yeah.
My conversation with Councilmember Esparza, where we landed, and Councilmember Esparza, correct me if I'm wrong, but where we landed was that we would incorporate the mayor's 2A into your item 2 on your memo.
Yeah, I thought you only concerned your 2A, Councilman or Vice Mayor.
I know, but I just wanted to address that one.
On whether we added that the mayor's 2A language to item 2 of the memo to Councilmember Carrasco and myself.
Yes.
Yeah, we had talked about that, and you had said that that would not have alleviated your concern, which is why we changed the wording on your 2A. If someone wants to make an amendment to that, I think that makes sense, where we can work to alleviate the mayor's concerns. I think he had, and you had wanted some additional clarity. And what we had talked about was create a blue ribbon task force to research and solicit community input on strong mayor and other potential charter reforms, to improve and update our governance structure, including align mayoral executive authority with residents and local businesses, reasonable expectations for responsive and accountable democratic governance in a major US city.
Mhm.
And just for help, Tony, if you don't mind putting the motion back up, because I'm comfortable with that being the language in the motion that we currently have as well, which I thought was something that we had accepted. But if that's not the case, maybe we can clarify the language. So I think that should be part of where it says approve items 2 and 3 from Councilmember Carrasco and Esparza's language, that explicitly stating what Councilmember Esparza just said.
Do you want me to read it again?
Sure, and that might help so that Tony can reestablish what it actually reads there.
Okay, so taking item number 2 on the memo of Councilmember Carrasco and myself, the item that reads create a blue ribbon task force to research and solicit community input on strong mayor and other potential charter reforms to improve and update our governance structure, and then changing that to comma, including, and then item 2A on the mayor's memo, which says, so comma, including 2A, aligned mayoral executive authority with residents and local businesses, reasonable expectation for responsive and accountable democratic governance in a major US city.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the current motion of accepting Councilmember Arenas' memo includes accepting recommendation 3, Councilmember Esparza, from your memo and Councilmember Carrasco's memo, which if you amend that language, that's what I thought we were comfortable accepting in the motion we currently have, which would include, as I was indicating at the beginning of my comments, would include the mayor's 2A.
The language appears in the city clerk's memo in red.
I believe that's actually Vice Mayor's 2A.
Yes, the red language is changes to Vice Mayor Jones's memo 2A.
That's correct.
And I just inserted what Councilmember Esparza said live on the screen in the bottom section.
And the Vice Mayor Jones, in the exchange that he and I had, he wanted both. I'm assuming he wanted both. I thought he just wanted the inclusion of those 4 words on his 2A. So.
Okay, so getting back to, I think, where we had left off, which was Mayor, yourself, I think you were about to sort of explain to us what you've alluded to, which is that there are concerns, and I guess these discussions we're having right here have not alleviated those concerns. Is that correct?
Well, obviously it helps. Yes, thank you. In addition, as I've raised a bit earlier today, I have concerns about spending additional funds on another ballot measure that would adjust the number of people on the Planning Commission. I think Councilmember Davis articulated very well views that I share as well, that the point of what we should be doing at the Planning Commission is ensuring that we have fair representation geographically in the city, and we can do that through ensuring they're districting. there is explicit districting of planning commissioners and their selection. So we have truly fair representation citywide. Adding commissioners, I suspect, will just increase the burden for staff and also create what I consider to be a dangerous alignment between planning commissioners and council members when the planning commission should be independent of the council.
And that was the extent of it?
That was another concern. So if we want to talk about that, we can certainly discuss it.
Okay, that's not all of them. You're just saying that's one more.
Yes, and I've also expressed my concern about a 2-year.
Okay, so yeah, happy to discuss that one. As I had mentioned earlier, I think, in fact, if there's any bifurcation of a vote, if that's a concern on whether or not you want to support a planning commission, either that initiative being added into the initiative with the redistricting and moving the mayor's race, or just as a standalone, if you just don't necessarily want to even support that at all, I think that we could easily bifurcate that and say, let's make a decision up or down as a council on whether or not we want to have a planning commission initiative or include it to any other initiative, rather than convolute it with the vote that we're trying to take now on moving the mayor's race. So I would be comfortable with that, but we don't have to make that amendment just yet. Hopefully that would alleviate your concern there. So then that way we can decide up or down that separately. And then happy to discuss I think the other outlying issue, which is you just alluded to, which is the 2-year versus 6-year. I think that Councilmember Davis brought up an interesting suggestion, which we know may cause some challenge on timing, as Ed pointed out. But it does maybe allow for more input, which would be, do we kick this over to the Charter Revision Commission as well, or to a commission for input on whether or not it be a 2-year or a 6-year term for the next mayor? Ed, as you mentioned to Councilmember Davis, you stated that the way to get that done would be we'd have to have a vote in the primary in March of 2022. So then that way we knew, or the voters knew precisely what they were voting for come November, correct?
Well, but you'd also have a primary where the candidates would be running for an office that they wouldn't know what the term would be of that office. So you'd be able
is that even possible? Yes or no?
Well, the thing is, you would have a gap there because the current term would end in 2022. Under the charter, the new one would come in 2024. So there would be a gap. And so something would have to happen, and it wouldn't be clear to the public or the candidate whether he or she would have a 2-year, a 6-year, and they would have to wait until the election in March of 2022. I'm assuming, to know what's happening in November of 2022.
Is that possible, or is there a legal challenge against that?
It's possible. It's just would be difficult, I think, for the voters and the candidates to run and discuss sort of their positions. It's possible. Well, yeah, you asked the question, is it possible? It is possible.
Great, thank you. And so I don't disagree that it certainly provides a lot of confusion for the candidates running, and then for those that are voting, whether or not they know that this person they're voting for is going to have 2 years or 6 years. But what it does provide clarity on is that there will be an election in 2022, and it also invites in the Charter Revision Commission to participate on deciding should it be 2 or 6. I don't think that alleviates some of my colleagues' concern, but I don't know if that alleviates your concern, Mayor.
Councilmember Pross, I would be perfectly fine having commission decide the appropriate distribution of those 2 years. I think we should also consider the possibility it may be a question of whether the next election thereafter is 2026 or 2028. And the reality is, however this decision is made, it's always going to be made with somebody in office or somebody about to get into office. So you just don't avoid that basic conflict that, you know, the issue of separating the personality and the term and all that. Look, we're stuck with a human system here. And fundamentally, if we believe this is something that's important to have public outreach about, then look, there's clearly a majority of council members are going to want to put this on the ballot, put it on the ballot in 2022.
Put what on the ballot in 2022?
Whichever date you're going to pick, put on the ballot in 2022 after we've had a chance to actually consult with the community in a meaningful way. And I don't consider what was done previously to be meaningful public input.
Okay, so what I am suggesting then, which would be allowing the Charter Revision Commission to decide, is it a short 2-year term or a long 6-year term for the next mayor, that they decide that in March of 2022.
Right, and then it goes on the ballot.
Well, it would be on a ballot in March of 2022.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. So then that way it's determined before the November elections of 2022. So that way everybody knows between March and November if they're voting for a 2-year term or a 6-year term.
That's correct.
Okay. And that would essentially then, because we'd have to make a decision today if we were talking about extending your term 2 years, if that were the case.
Right. And the one way to take me out of it is to have the decision made in 2022.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, I am agnostic on 2 or 6 years. I've made my argument as to why. Certainly, I think that either one, I think, has positives and negatives. Certainly, I think, right, we've heard some input on what people feel is in regards to the 2 years or the 6 years. But I do think I've made it very clear as well that I feel as though our voters should have that opportunity in 2022 to be able to decide. This gives them 2 opportunities. It gives them an opportunity to decide if they want a 2-year term or a 6-year term, and then it gets them an opportunity in November to decide on who that should be. So I'm comfortable with that amendment as well, and certainly I respect Councilmember Arenas' concern, right, that she's not necessarily interested in accepting any friendly amendments if it doesn't necessarily have an indication of the unity that the mayor so expressly pointed out in his memorandum. So I'm comfortable with that as a direction. Certainly, I provided my input too in regards to the Planning Commission. I think that would be the only piece of this that I would be willing to bifurcate if that's a contention, because I know I personally would like to add that to this ballot in November of 2020. And if there are others, including yourself, Mayor, that don't want to, I think we could give the professional courtesy to allow you to vote no on that today. If that meant that indeed you were willing to vote yes on the collective agreement of what we have as a motion and the friendly amendments I'm suggesting. So I guess I would like to go back to Councilmember Arenas, but I think certainly would understand that she's looking for you to, to interpret that we've appeased the concerns that you have.
Yeah, so if the amendments to the motion would say that the issue of moving the mayoral election would be before the voters after public input through the commission in March of 2022, I would be willing to support that.
So you've shifted it up a little bit. I think I was describing that we would put it in front of the commission and the voters ultimately in March of 2022, whether it was a 2-year term or a 6-year term for the next mayor, not whether or not we moved the mayor's election, because we would have to decide on that today. Otherwise, how do we have a primary race for the next mayor in March of 2022? I think we would have to decide on that today. Am I wrong?
In either way, you're stuck with a 2022 election. So that's why I'm saying there's no point in putting something on the ballot this year, because either way, you're stuck with a 2022 election. So the real question is, what happens after 2022? That could be left to public input, followed by a vote. At this point, all of us are winging it. We're all just guessing, well, maybe this 2 years would be better, maybe 6 years would be better. If we really want public input, let's really have public input.
Thinking back to my memo I wrote on the 24th to the Rules Committee, I actually believe that was my recommendation at the end of that memo, was rather than sort of rush everything. I'm not looking at it right now, but I believe the last sort of recommendation that I gave was why rush these components in this hastily done compromise and not put anything on the ballot when we know that we actually have time before the 2024 next presidential election. And so I am not necessarily against that either, but if we have an opportunity to move forward with knowing that we can move the mayor's race to the presidential cycle, put that on the ballot this year, and allow the commission, the Charter Revision Commission, to determine either is it 2 or 6 years for the next mayor, I would prefer to do that. It sounds like you're not necessarily comfortable with that, though. You would rather have it all go to the Charter Revision Commission, and then we don't put the moving the mayor's race on the ballot this November.
Well, I think it makes more sense to have it all decided by the voters at once. Because, I mean, it sounds like the only thing you'd be moving is a mayor's election starting in 2028. And if that's what you're doing, there's no reason why it can't all be done at once in 2022.
Yeah, you would be debating between, is it 2024 or 2028? Agreed.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I'm not terribly against that either, that we sort of slow the process down even further to say, let's allow the Charter Revision Commission to decide on not only how it's done, right, in regards to moving the mayor's race, with including what happens to the odd numbered districts, which we've talked about, right, that we don't know necessarily the impact of that. So that could be part of the discussion, as well as, is it a 2 or a 2-year term or a 6-year term? So when do we actually do it? So I'm not against that either. I think that may be, I don't know if that'll be acceptable by the maker of the motion. So that probably won't be a friendly amendment. But if ultimately the amendment that we have on the floor fails, I think that might be worth a conversation. But I'll kick it over to the maker of the motion at this point, because I've laid out a couple, at least friendly amendments, besides this one that the mayor just pointed out, that I think are worthwhile. It doesn't look like, though, the mayor is fully on board unless we move everything over to the Charter Revision Commission, but I'm happy to hear what the maker of the motion states.
Yes, thank you, council member. I want to remind everyone that I think one of the areas that we all agreed on, and I thought we had turned a corner, was the approval in the November 2020 ballot to add a measure aligning the mayoral election with the presidential year. And it was even written about in an article. It was hyped up as such. Some of my residents and some of the stakeholders even told me, oh, well, it sounds like, the compromise has already been made. And so, and they kind of sighed a sigh of relief, seeing some of that from our mayor. And I was very appreciative of the message of unity in your memo, Mayor, specifically acknowledging that we really shouldn't be fighting with one another when there's so many issues that our residents need us to be in union with each other to address. And it sounds like as soon as we address one issue, it's like a matter of whack-a-mole, Councilmember Perales. You're doing a great job in terms of addressing some of those concerns, and I really appreciate that you're pivoting this much. And I'm willing to entertain this this amendment. I just don't see a very sincere support for this motion on the floor. And I'm really saddened. I think the only segment of the only item that was really vetted, and I said this before, was actually the fair elections initiative, because that did have quite a bit of grassroots organizations participating in it, having residents learn about it for a whole year. This was born out of community organization versus really us. And so I can't see a truer a voice being heard and voiced than the fair elections among all of these other items. And so I'll take your amendment very resistantly because I don't see a genuine agreement here, even though the message is about unity. I've yet to see that, and I've yet to see us moving forward as part of the messaging that was in this memo. And so I'd really like to see uniting in crisis and moving forward in practice rather than on a memo. I'll accept your amendment.
Councilmember Perales, can you restate the amendment that you're asking Councilmember Arenas to accept?
Yeah, so it included a couple of things. Let's see here. Number one was eliminating recommendation 5 from her memorandum, which would not, so that we were not required to combine the charter, the redistricting, or the planning commission items with the IPA reforms. And then it was clarifying from the mayor's memo that items 2, B, C, and D would be vetted out by both the FPPC and the charter revision commissions. And then it was this last portion that would be the decision of whether the next term or the term for the next mayor would be 2 years or 6 years would be decided upon by the Charter Revision Commission to be concluded in a election in March of 2022.
So also just to clarify, would the mayor's election be moved to 2024?
No, there would be an election in 2022. We would not know if it's for 2 or 6 years until March of 2022 in the primary, as we discussed earlier.
Okay, so this ballot measure that we have today includes moving the election to 2024. That would not be a part of this particular ballot measure.
No, that would be decided upon in March of 2022 by the Charter Revision Commission. Would it be 2024 or would it be 2028?
Okay.
Again, obviously lining up right with the 2 years or the 6 years for the next.
Right. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Anything further, Councilmember? Now we'll go to Councilmember. No. Okay. Councilmember Esparza?
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. So if this gets moved to March of 2022, what happens if the elections are moved to June 2022?
Well, I can answer that question. The city's elections by default under the charter are to be consolidated with the statewide primary election as well as the statewide general election. So if the state moves its elections, then the city's elections will move automatically as well. And so if the June 2022, or if the primary in 2022 is moved to June, the city's election will move to June of 2022. And then that just means that if you're going to submit a ballot measure, you'll have additional time to do it.
Okay, thank you. And then I had a question over section 9 of the charter language. So is it correct that you need feedback from us on that item today? So we have an option that authorizes the city council or any member or members of the council to author and submit a ballot measure argument in favor of the ballot measure, or but determines that rebuttal arguments will not be allowed, or the submittal of rebuttal arguments in response to arguments for or against the ballot measure, and authorizes the city council or any member or members of the city council to author and submit a rebuttal.
No, that decision doesn't need to be made today. That will be presented for the council with the ballot measure on the 4th.
Okay.
That language will appear on all the ballot measures, so you'll have to make a decision on all the ballot measures with regard to that language. It just appeared today because we wanted to give you the form of the ballot measure. And as Mark said, all of those choices will have to be made on August the 4th on all of the ballot measures.
Good, thank you. You know, obviously we've had a lot of discussions around democracy. My preference is the second option, which would allow, just as we allowed Councilmember Johnny Camus to participate in rebuttal and opposition arguments to Measure E, that the council would not be silenced from participating in similar actions as Councilmember Camus did previously. And I look forward to seeing that on August 4th. You know, I wanted to have, I'll keep it short. I wanted to make some comments around, and also since we're giving a lot to the commission, I just wanted to double check. So the commission, per the scope of work from Vice Mayor Jones's memo, is their scope of work includes the odd number districts. Is that correct?
Yes.
It looks at moving them around. So would it be then, would that commission have the purview if they're looking at extending or looking at mayoral terms, would that commission also then have the authority to look at council member terms?
They can make that recommendation, yes.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. I lastly just wanted to make a comment about the Planning Commission. To say that I'm disappointed, you know, we've heard calls for unity and stability, but it seems that when we fight for our communities, it's divisive, you know, and yet this Planning Commission vote, in spite of having reforms that when people were watching and when that item was in the press, there was a desire to have actual reform. And now suddenly, people are concerned about diversity and reform when they were not concerned about diversity, when the majority of Planning Commission members came from District 6. And when the East Side did not have any representation. And so now there's this sudden concern about planning commissions, and now people want to get rid of it. So, you know, fine, we're subject to the vote of a majority of this council on any given Tuesday. I get that, but, you know, let's be honest. It's a hypocrisy to talk about diversity and unity when we didn't have those concerns before, and now all of a sudden we want to toss that out. So I'm extremely disappointed in that, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Esparza. If you're referring to any comments I've made, I've been very consistent about my concerns about having an 11-member planning commission, where there would be an implicit connection between a planning commissioner and a council member and the independence of that planning commission. I have also been clear that I fully support ensuring that there be diversity, particularly geographic diversity, on the Planning Commission, and we can do that through districting, exactly as Councilmember Davis suggested, and as I have suggested earlier in months prior. Councilmember
You
Davis,
weren't concerned with that when you signed on to the memo that we co-wrote last year, and you weren't concerned with diversity when you voted to add Pierre Luigi to the board. So be honest.
Councilmember Diep.
Yes, so thank you, Mayor. I've kind of lost track of the various threads, and I'm trying to think what I can add to this discussion that hasn't already been said. So I'll just kind of share some thoughts about what I've heard, some reactions of mine to the discussion. Sorry, let me move this screen down here so I'm looking at you. I just want to say that a few weeks ago, this body on a split vote decided to move forward with a ballot measure. And in the intervening holiday weeks of July recess, we've heard more from community, and some people have changed their minds in regards to process, and I can appreciate that. So there is a change in process that we're discussing about the timing of all this, letting the idea of expanding mayoral powers breathe more, and letting commission have a public process to help the community understand more of what we're really dealing with. And I can appreciate that, and that's fine. What I don't think we're doing, which I think some council members may, be thinking, is that we are also backtracking on the notion that San Jose needs to move towards a system where there is more accountability in one person in this body that we serve on. And I'm not backing off of that. I think I'm the one person on this council that has advocated for the strong mayor most vigorously through my memo and through previous comments, and I still believe that. And I am fine with sending commission and having them study that. I don't feel that it is somehow improper for us as a body to shape the discussion or assign the commission what to look at in terms of moving the discussion more towards fleshing out why it's important to have a strong mayor or what the benefits are. Because really, I think what my understanding of the past few weeks is that the feedback we've gotten through polling and other methods is that the community is a bit confused. They support the idea of checks and balances. They support the idea of having accountability in one individual. But when you put 3 different ideas in a 75-word ballot measure, things get a bit confusing, and they're not clear on that. So to the extent that we have more time and we have a public process, the commission to flesh out those ideas, that's fine. But I don't think that delaying this measure is the same thing as abandoning the idea completely and going to a commission to say, well, why don't you just come up with your best ideas and let's do whatever the public process leads us. I think there's nothing wrong with this council guiding that discussion. And I understand we've had discussions about democracy and whatnot, but I will say that while I don't represent San Jose broadly, any one person, I have my constituencies, I have groups that support or don't support me, like each and every one of us. The thing that differentiates the 11 of us on this council than a community-based organization or somebody who takes the time to write an email or make public comment is that we went through a process, and for a certain amount of time, we get to hold the title of elected official, and we get to represent our constituencies. And during that time, we do what we feel is in our best judgment, and we lead the city in the way we feel best. And we are held accountable for that every 4 years. So I kind of want to push back on the notion that, when we as a body give direction, we are somehow being undemocratic because we are not inviting the public to comment or sit in with us on every topic that we discuss. I think it's fair game for us to say, we, the majority of this council, maybe not everybody, but the majority of this body at this particular moment feels that San Jose needs to move towards a strong mayor system, or at least stronger mayor system, and form a commission to explore that and to come back with those findings. And after this election cycle, there might be a different composition. You can change that again. That's how democracy works. But I don't think it's somehow foul play or inappropriate for us to set the agenda for whatever commission to come back with. That's my personal opinion. As for the moving the mayoral election, I've been on the record, I feel consistently saying that I'm not swayed by the arguments put forth because, again, the barriers to entry and voting in Santa Clara County are very low in as far as I'm concerned. But I understand we're here, and I would never advocate to move the mayor's election away from a presidential year. It just is where it is. I think elections are there, it's the cycle, and we just go with it. I was resistant to spending money to put this on a ballot measure, and then we've already spent money with the recount, and now we're here. So I see the momentum, and I'm not going to oppose that. But in doing so, we do create this problem with the 2-year gap in the shift. And in my personal opinion, as a process matter, I I am in favor of extending the current mayoral term by 2 years. And that for me is a process matter. I understand that I appreciate what Mayor Liccardo has done for the city, and you know, I'm happy with his leadership. But even this were a mayor that I did not approve of, a mayor that I disagreed with, a mayor that was on an opposite political spectrum with me, I still believe as a process matter, that's the best thing to do, because it is a problem of our own creation. This problem of this 2-year gap is not really a problem. We as a council, by trying to shift the mayoral election, are creating this problem. And so we should minimize it as much as possible, to the extent that there is harm. And by harm, I mean this confusion around a shorter term for candidates, a potential zigzag in political direction of the city. And also the burden of just whoever might want to throw their hat in, trying to convince a spouse or their family around their political future. It matters whether you're going to be in office for 4 years or 6 years or 2 years. I mean, the risk of investing a year of your life in a campaign, getting your spouse and putting them in the public light, your kids and whatnot, and then going in there and taking the city down one direction, trying to figure out and learn what you're doing. You know, think about any one of us. Think about what we've done in our first term, 2 years in. Would you like to be judged 2 years into your council term about what you've accomplished, what you've done? And I know that I wouldn't, because there is a steep learning curve. There is a steep learning curve to what we do here. And as a candidate, you think about it one way, you read the paper, you chime in and you watch a council meeting every now and then, and you think you know what you're talking about. And you get in here and you figure out how deep the water is. And you're learning and you're trying to tread water and you're trying to understand where the bathrooms are at City Hall and staff and community leaders and all of this. And then you're just getting your bearings about you. You hit in a certain stride right around the mid-year mark. And then you have to be judged about what have you done in your first 2 years. Well, I've been learning my first 2 years. I've been figuring things out, navigating the process and using my best judgment and honing my skills. So I do think that, for many reasons, you set up an incumbent who has the 2 years, who's more likely going to win maybe, or even if not, you set them up for failure, because what can you accomplish and run on after 2 years for that extended term? What have you done in the 2 terms that you deserve another 4 years? 2 years to deserve another 4 years. And I'm not sure that you can mount a successful campaign on that, except if you spend your 2 years kind of thinking about just winning again 2 years from now, and instead of doing the job of serving and leading. And to the extent that there is a shift again with another candidate, the incumbent loses, there is political whiplash. So I think we have somebody who is experienced, somebody who knows San Jose and who has led, and somebody who has, even today, expressed a willingness to reach across the aisle and unite the city rather than divide and just push through whatever political agendas that may exist because he or she has the votes. And I think that is a sign of leadership. And I would appreciate having that consistency for another 2 years and then having the 4-year term be aligned in 2024. That's my personal opinion, because who wants to go into an election? And I heard the amendment. Who would want to go to an election not knowing if you're going to serve for 2 years or 4 years? Like, how do you plan your family around that? How do you plan your life around that? How do you get your spouse to buy into that? And also, talking about good governance and diversity and representation and equity and all that, I think we need to make it easier for folks of all backgrounds, not just the independently wealthy, not people who are financially independent, to run for public office. And part of that is giving them certainty. When I step out and put my name out there and run and hopefully win, what am I planning for? Am I getting 2 years or 4? And I think the 4 years is what people generally want. I think that a part of this is also, this is a separate discussion, but making sure that all elected official offices at all level are paid a wage at a certain place that people from various diverse backgrounds can step in and leave their job and try to step into a position of leadership. Finally, with the planning commission issue, I think that I recognize and I remember very clearly what Councilmember Esparza is saying. It was a late night meeting. This was not the last meeting of the year. It was like the second to last or maybe the third to last. And we were having this discussion. And Councilmember Esparza's recollection, I remember, as she says, we did vote on this. And whenever we have a planning or a motion that goes to a ballot measure that goes to the ballot to voters, we'll include some sort of planning commission thing. But during that same meeting, we also had the discussion about 7 being the magic number, and we can avoid the planning commission issue going to voters if we reduce it to 7, because that's what's already in the charter, and we can do that as a council ordinance, as opposed to any other number being at 9 or 11 or 21 or whatever, having to go to voters, and that can save us some financial burdens in doing that. And I think we're kind of saying the same thing here in terms of asking for diversity and representation across the city. We can do that by recommissioning and redrawing boundaries in a way that we have a commission that is not in essence, a shadow council. It is not a body that mirrors the city council and sets up individuals that are maybe hoping to run for city council in a future date. If you shift the boundaries and one commissioner on the planning commission represents and straddles districts 5 and 3, and then there's one that straddles 5 and 4 and whatever, you are able to achieve the goals of diversity and representation of geography and the east side and the north side and the west side without having to jump through all these hurdles. Because if you go back to the tape of that meeting and my line of questioning to staff, what is the planning commission? What do they do? And ultimately, all the big decisions have to come back to council anyway. So they are not spending city resources. They are not trying to attract development to any one region. They are a body that accepts applications and vets applications from private developers and people who want to do things with their land. And they give it up or down, is this an acceptable project? The part about developing, about diversity or caring or to fight gentrification or to include more amenities in a certain part of town, that's a council job. That's not a planning commission job. So to the extent that the planning commission is guided by the general plan and whatever decisions that they make that we don't agree with, we can't overturn as a council. I'm not concerned with the planning commission being a 7-body panel or commission, because their power is limited, and I think we can achieve what everybody on this body is saying by moving forward with that. So I would be in support of that. I'm not making any amendments necessarily to this because I'm not sure where we're at necessarily, but I would simply ask that as part of the direction to the Blue Ribbon Commission or the Charter Review Task Force, whatever we want to call it, as a starting point for their discussions, that they read the memo I submitted and give it an up or down vetting, but use that as a starting point for discussion. That's all. And with that, I'll yield.
Thank you, Councilmember. All right, let's vote on Councilmember Ranch's motion. Tony, could you display the motion so everyone can see it?
Yes, give me a second. Did this include the amendments from Peralez?
I believe Councilmember Ranch indicated she accepted those amendments. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Ed.
Those are highlighted in yellow.
Okay.
And then when you're done, I'll display the votes as I call the roll.
Okay. There are more hands raised and everyone's spoken several times, so let's just have clarification issues, questions. Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So if I understand the motion on the floor, and based on where we were before Councilmember Peralez's friendly amendments, I was actually 95% there in terms of what we put together. I don't have an issue with eliminating Councilmember Arenas' number 5. I did want some clarity though, Councilmember Peralez. Was your direction also to go with one of the options, option 1 or 2 for the census, or was that left open?
I'm sorry, I don't think we had specified that, but I'm comfortable with, I think it was the option 2.
So it's probably better for Councilmember Ranch since she's the maker of the motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Councilmember Davis that you brought up the option 2 for us to be able to do that through our own ordinance revision, and so I think that's practical, and I'll opt for that, and hopefully everybody can agree to that, and show your vote that way. Mm-hmm.
Right, and so I support that, Councilmember Arenas. The part I don't support though is moving the decision to go with 2 years or 6 years to the Charter Review Commission. for all the issues that were raised in terms of just all the uncertainty. But the other issue too is that my expectation is when the voters vote on this, that what happens with the mayor over that gap period of time should be part of their decision-making process. So I don't want to see those separated out. And as I stated earlier, my preference is to extend the mayor's term by 2 years. So unless Councilmember Arenas is willing to accept that friendly amendment to extend the mayor's term, I would not be able to support the motion. And if the motion fails, I will make a new motion with all the elements that we've already agreed on and come together on, with the one difference of extending the mayor's term.
There is an underlying motion, to be clear. So even if this should pass, then obviously it's enacted. If it doesn't pass, I believe we go to Councilmember Carrasco's motion, just to clarify.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, except Councilmember Arenas, her motion, except for
Right.
one item, it's kind of like.
I don't know whether this is my motion anymore.
We'll figure out
that clarification. I just wanted to just make the point that
okay.
Besides, one particular disagreement, pretty much Councilmember Arenas' motion is the one.
Okay. Councilmember Peros.
Yeah, I think there were maybe two outstanding items, and I actually do agree with Councilmember Jones. There may be completely overlapping here with the motions, but I think we'll nevertheless get to figuring out what happens with this one first. So I think number one, so that there's no, I think, issue on the major discussions we're having, and especially around this planning commission. I do think it would be important to separate that out, to bifurcate that from the rest of the vote that we have, and then to try and bring consensus to the final sort of 5%. I actually did find my memorandum from June 24th, or find the final sentence where I did actually say, the unnecessarily rushed nature of this proposal significantly stifles community voices and eliminates equitable participation. Therefore, I urge my colleagues to do the right thing and reject placing anything on the November 2020 ballot, and instead demand the proper community input before moving forward with any charter amendments. And so going back to the discussion that Mayor, you and I were having, we didn't make that part of the friendly amendment, but hearing certainly all the commentary and recognizing again the confusion that could bring in March of 2022, I'm comfortable with asking Councilmember Arenas if she's willing to accept that as well. That would essentially kick the entirety of the discussion over to the Charter Revision Commission, and allow them to make that decision in 2022.
Oh boy, so that is completely leaving everything to the Charter Revision Commission. Is that okay?
That's correct.
Listen, I don't know that my motion is my motion anymore. And I think I really was accepting a lot of these amendments in good faith and in hopes that I would earn the support of my colleagues. And somehow I continue to hear if it's not one issue, it's another. There'll be another issue that'll come up that will be the issue that they can't agree on. And ultimately, I think it's the 2-year extension that is the underlying reason that our colleagues can't move forward. I really hope. I mean, I read your memo. I read your comments in Spotlight, and I was really hopeful in a message of unity. There's nothing more that I would like than to serve with all of you to make sure that our city is supported in the way that it needs to during a pandemic, a recession, a looming loss of homes for many of our families. This is when we should all be really using each other to maximize and leverage all of our resources. But I don't know that anything has really changed from the last meeting to today, except that the illusion of a compromise, there was an appearance of an illusion of a compromise, and I really was hoping that that we were going to be able to move forward. And I'm really disappointed. I'm disappointed because I feel that the messages that I heard from each and every one of you is that you value diversity and that you value equity and that you want people to contribute. But when it comes down to it, it has to be everything on your terms. And I don't believe in an election, an unelected official getting additional years. Congress does this, assembly members do this every 2 years. They go up for election if they can do it. We certainly can do it here in the city of San Jose. And they do it without a pandemic, and they do it they're gonna do it with a pandemic in the horizon. So I would say, it's a long way of saying, I don't know what else there is to give away, Raul. But if this will allow for some of our colleagues to get on board finally, because I don't know what other reason, I don't know what you're gonna pull out of a hat now, but if it really truly you want to unify us, then let's move forward and let's make this motion something that creates a reset button for all of us and allows for us to put things in the past and for us to move forward and to start fighting together for our city. Because at this point, we are so divided, and this will continue to ring through the rest of the year, unfortunately. So long way of saying, I will accept your friendly amendment, council member. I just don't know, you've been pivoting every which way to make sure that people can get on board, and I really appreciate it. There's a skill set to that, but I'm just calling it as it is, and hopefully prove me wrong. Vote for this measure, vote for this motion, and let's move on with it. So yes, long way of saying I'll accept your amendment.
Mayor, may I ask what the amendment was? I've been following everything.
A lot of amendments. That's fair question. So Councilmember Perales, could you restate the amendment?
Yeah, so essentially what it would do is it would take the totality of the discussion that we've been talking about, including moving of the mayor's race and whether or not, this affects a term of a long term, or the 2-year term or a 6-year term. And we would allow the Charter Revision Commission to discuss that and bring back their recommendations in 2022. And then we would put that on a ballot if indeed we choose to. And that would determine how we move forward with all of this. So it essentially takes the totality of that discussion over to the Charter Revision Commission.
One clarification, Councilmember Perales, if there is an election in March of 22, we probably need those recommendations back in late 21 so they could be put on a ballot. Is that your understanding?
Yes, but in essence, this does buy everybody time, because
right.
If we're not at this point now rushing to decide on what the next mayor gets in the race in 2024, I actually don't think there's the rush to hit the 2021. Now, we would have to if we're trying to get to March of 2022. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there'd be ample time. In your direction, you said 2022, and I just want to make sure there'd be time to actually put something on the ballot.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm supportive of that.
Mayor, since we are going to be tasked with bringing back something, I'm trying to figure out what we're bringing back. I understand Councilmember Arenas has accepted that amendment. The only other items that would be required to be on a charter amendment would be the Planning Commission and the redistricting. Are those still expected for us to draft and come back August the 4th, or are those part of the measures that are going also to the commission?
I believe so, Ed. I believe those would come back.
Okay.
Is that the maker of the motion's understanding?
What I had asked for was that they come back and that we just bifurcate that vote on those two.
Right.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Councilor Pross, are you suggesting the bifurcate a vote on this?
No, on those two, on the two remaining charter revisions,
Okay,
given that we've heard some people, including yourself, say that you're not necessarily comfortable with the planning commission going onto the ballot this November, as described, that we just bifurcate the two of those as we're going to decide on them now.
great, thank you. All right, Councilmember Arenas.
You know, I said my piece.
Oh, okay. I just saw
thank
your hand up, so I just want to make sure you.
Thank you.
Councilor Esparza.
So I had a question for the city attorney. So ultimately, charter amendments come to the city council for a vote. Is that correct?
Correct. They come to a vote to be placed on the ballot, yes.
Correct. All right. Thank you.
Okay, let's vote then. Councilmember Arenas' motion. Let's be clear about what we're voting on, what might be bifurcated. Ed or Tony, do you want to take a cut at this?
Okay, so I have highlighted from Arenas' memo number 5, direct staff to revise redistricting. That's being removed to a separate item. It will not be included with this item. And then I have.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
My understanding, and it's highlighted here in yellow, I don't know if you can see my mouse pointing to it, is that the redistricting planning commission items from number 5 of Councilmember Arenas' memo is being removed from this particular item to come separately on August 4th.
No, we just removed that direction altogether.
Okay. So yeah, I have it removed altogether. The attorney's office, I figure they'll do what they.
We'll have to figure it out.
And then I have that the decision whether the term is 2 to 6 years is not coming back. That's going to go to the Charter Commission.
And the election, and moving the election to 2024 is also going to the commission.
Okay.
Yes. Well,
suspect we may need some follow-up discussion just to have some issues around cleanup to make sure Ed knows what language he should draft and what language.
right, because I still have this. I keep pointing with my finger, but you can't see it. In the 2022 election cycle, hold either an election for a 6-year term or a special 2-year mayoral term. So I still have that effective in Councilmember Arenas' memo.
That is what is just amended, I believe.
Yeah, that's what we just moved over to the Charter Revision Commission.
Okay.
Point of order, did we also not remove the, in the subhead, approve items 2 and 3 from memorandum from Councilmember Carrasco and Esparza number 3? We removed that as well. The mayoral election will not go on the 2020 ballot. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, that I did not catch. Thank you.
Right, that was the final amendment that was just made right now in regards to moving that as well to the Charter Revision Commission.
Okay.
Okay, you have it highlighted, Tony, so this.
I also don't see there Vice Mayor Chappie Jones item on the odd number districts.
That's actually
Yeah, it incorporated my my whole memo.
Yeah, I have adopted both items from Vice Mayor Jones' memo up here. I'm highlighting it with changes to 2A. So I didn't copy and paste all the items from his memo. I just said adopt both items.
So Tony, I want to make sure we're super clear on this because
Right.
next it's highlighted. It's actually not part of the motion. So rather than it being highlighted, it should either be struck or deleted.
What's this part here?
Yeah, highlighting is not, I don't want any.
Right. I understand.
The fact of what we voted for, what we didn't. So let's be clear, that's struck. Thank you.
And Mayor, I need a clarification as to exactly what is going on the ballot. What are we voting right now to put on the ballot in November?
My understanding at this point is that this is just dealing with items that will not be on the ballot. You still will have a vote as to whether or not the Planning Commission and the redistricting will be on the ballot because those require charter amendments. This motion will not include that, is my understanding.
And so the motion does not include, strong mayor. It does not include moving the mayoral election, and it does not include the Blue Ribbon Commission because that's something we can do ourselves. Is that correct?
Correct, and it doesn't include any of the limitations on contributions or conflicts because those will be going separately to on other commissions.
Okay, and so today's meeting, we just did not put anything on the ballot. Got it. Thank
No.
you.
You still have two other items that you're going to consider putting on the ballot, the Planning Commission and the redistricting.
Correct. I just want to be clear about what it is right now that we're putting on the ballot. Thank you.
Okay, so I struck this top part. It says adopt item 3 from the mayor's memo and item 3 from the Carrasco Esparza memo because those are placing something on the ballot. So this section is gone. This section 2 is amended down here from Perales. So that's going to go to the Charter Review Commission. And then we have adopting both items from Vice Mayor Jones' memo with language changes in red. Then directing staff to refer the proposed campaign finance reports, et cetera, to the BFCPP, as well as the Charter Commission. And then more on creating the Blue Ribbon Task Force Charter Commission. Does that look okay?
I'm gonna, Councilor Davis, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, while this motion doesn't place anything on the ballot, what it does do is it creates the Charter Revision Commission and the scope for the Charter Revision Commission. So we did not just waste a day. We have not wasted 3 days. We are in fact doing something right now, even though we have not placed anything on the ballot. We have given a scope to a commission.
Right, but that scope does not go on the ballot. It's what we're doing today, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any other hands up. So let's vote. Tony?
Jimenez,
Yes.
Perales,
Aye.
Dieppe,
Aye.
Carrasco,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Esparza,
Yes.
Arenas,
Yes. Yes.
Bolton,
Aye.
Camus,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Liccardo.
Aye.
That passes.
Thank you. Okay, returning now to the remaining items are with regard to the redistricting relating to the census. Should we take that item next? There is a motion that Councilmember Arenas has made it been bifurcated. Does anyone wish to speak on that issue? The option is 2, which gives the council flexibility to draft a municipal code provision to allow for additional time, particularly where there's delays in the census. And I'll support that. Is there any comment? All right, Councilmember Perales.
Just confirming, so we'll vote on this first, and then we're going to vote on the Planning Commission?
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, let's vote. Tony?
Jimenez,
Yes.
Perales,
Aye.
Dieppe,
Aye.
Crosco,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Esparza,
Yes.
Arenas,
Aye.
Foley,
Aye.
Yemis,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Ricardo.
Aye.
Thank you.
And the final item is on the Planning Commission on expanding the number of planning commissioners to 11. Are there any comments?
Mayor, I have a question. Is that that will be the motion then on the floor?
I believe you made the motion to go forward to expand to 11. Am I incorrect about that, Councilmember?
I incorporated what was already in the language that the lawyers had worked out and moved forward in the resolution.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And Councilmember Davis.
So I'm agnostic as to the number of planning commission members, and since we have drastically simplified the thing that's going to the ballot, it's fine with me if we have 11 members, but and if they're geographically tied, that's also fine with me. What I would like is for the council to have to vote on them all, and not for them not to be individually appointed by the council member for that district then.
So that would be a friendly amendment.
That is a request for a friendly amendment, yes.
Yes.
I just think it's very helpful. So let me give a comment before you make your decision, Councilmember Arenas. I think it's helpful for us to continue to have the discussions on the dais about planning commissioners. We don't get to do that in terms of the makeup of the council. We don't get to do that for other commissions, although I think it's worth a try. We have had some very good conversations and some changes to the Planning Commission that have allowed for greater voices and greater diversity in a number of ways, not just geographically, as I said before, but also gender and race. And I think we don't know what that means for the decisions necessarily, but I do know that the diversity on our council has changed the conversation and the decisions that we make. And I would like to continue being able to address those issues in their totality for the Planning Commission, rather than have this just an appointment system as we do for other commissions, because this is a quasi-judicial board and needs to be representative of our city. So that's the reasoning for my request.
Right. Listen, I think that part of appointing a person or every council member appointing a person that represents their district is part of integrating diversity and different voices into the overall commission. There's something about someone overriding my recommendation for my own district that just doesn't bode well for me, right? And so if there is a majority of folks who don't like my commissioner or applicant in particular, then I will be, then my district won't be represented by somebody that knows my district, that understands the issues, that understands the development policy that's in place for my particular district. And so, and I think each one of us has a different elements and different, we're all unique in a very different way. Downtown has a lot more development, obviously, than mine did. And so I think we know the kind of candidate that we need to represent our area. And I wouldn't want to give away that level of that, my recommendation to the greater council, because otherwise we go back to the same place. We're in the same place. We might as well only have 7 or 3 or 2. It doesn't really matter because the majority will overrule. So I apologize. I won't be able to accept your friendly amendment.
Okay.
Just for clarification, the language that we wrote was based on the recommendation from Councilmember Camus. It simply indicated that there had to be a representative from each of the districts. it specifically, it did not say that the council member would select them. However, so that's an open question at this point.
Okay. Obviously, we have a selection process today, which allows for the full council to participate, Ed. The question is whether we would want to delineate that that would continue in the future. And by doing that, ensure that that is reflected in the charter
Can you
itself.
repeat that? I'm sorry, you were going in and out. I can't hear.
Okay, sure. So Ed just described essentially that the charter language that's proposed doesn't explicitly describe how or prescribe how a commissioner would be selected. It just merely says there'd be 11 commissioners representing district and one at large. I would be supportive of this amendment or this motion if we did have language aligned with what Councilmember Davis just articulated, namely that there would be a council-wide participation in selection as we do today, rather than simply a single council member selecting their delegate. And I know this is an issue that is not on everyone's minds today, but it was certainly 15 years ago when there was widespread condemnation of what was considered to be then a mini mayor system. And it led to a lot of very questionable decision-making. And ultimately, in years prior, I think it's fair to say some corruption because there was in fact a convicted council member. And I believe strongly in what Councilmember Davis has articulated as being critically important to ensure the independence of the Planning Commission from the council. If we lose that independence, I think that is a very bad thing for the future of our city. So I appreciate that amendment was not accepted. If someone at some point wants to either offer it again or offer an alternative, I'm happy to support it. Councilmember Esparza.
Thank you. Okay, so the original memo that we submitted in April 2019 had the structure of commissions where we would have representation in each from each council district to address the geographic inequities that have occurred, particularly on the Planning Commission for a long time. And look, I think we have bad decisions made all the time. We have decisions made that I don't agree with, right? But we have a system, and we have before us an opportunity to create a new system that would have to create a new system that would have that kind of representation. I actually don't have a problem with Councilmember Davis's desire to have planning commissioners come before us at the council. I think it is an important commission, which is why we fought so hard last year against not having representation. I think it's why, particularly in the East Side, that hasn't had infrastructure for many years, and why this East Side is the only place in the city that has formula-based zoning. It's why it's important to have that representation, and it shouldn't just be important to the East Side. Frankly, I think it should be important to every council district and neighborhood in our city, that we all have unique issues in our city, but we do need that representation. And so if we had an opportunity to have folks come and be interviewed before us at the council, I think that's fine.
All right, Councilmember Rennes, did you want to reconsider friendly amendment?
Well, I want to ask a question about that. So say there is one candidate per district that has been moved forward by each of us. how would the council decide or eliminate? So say my candidate just didn't muster up, and so that one gets X'd out. So then I have to make another recommendation, or does that mean that the next one up, if there is an additional commissioner that has applied, but I didn't appoint it, or somebody from whatever respective district didn't appoint that commissioner, then that commissioner moves up. I don't understand exactly how the process would work.
Here, let me suggest, and Councilor Davis, feel free to weigh in here, but I think it would operate as it does today. It would be open to everyone in your district who wants to apply. And then we would have a winnowing process as we do today, so we don't have to do 200 interviews. Obviously, it's a limited number. And then those 3 individuals from your district would come before us, and we would select among them, as we did today. The point is, there wouldn't be your candidate or my candidate. There would be simply members of the community who came forward, and they would all have an equal opportunity to interview with the council.
Sure. I'd like to hear from a couple of more of my council colleagues to see if they're all, I will bend with the flow here if that's where we can find consensus, but I just want to hear a couple of other voices before I accept that friendly amendment.
If I can also say something, the reason we moved forward with this so that it was clear that you would get representation from each district. We left the process open that the council could consider that separately. We have a lot of rules and ordinances that apply to appointments, and so we wanted to at least get the principle that there would be one for each district, and the process would be left up to the mayor and the council, as the mayor indicated. We currently have processes that can easily be used in this process, and so we didn't want to create a situation where the charter had all the details when in fact the council may want different details, so long as each of the districts represented somebody from that district.
So at the very least, the assurance is that there will be a representative from that particular district. It's just not of the council members choosing or appointment.
Right. The whole process on selecting that representative is not in the charter. It simply indicates that it would have to be a representative of a particular district, and that process is left open.
Got it. Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, I think that's a very good point to clear up, that at the very least that it's my appointment or or the candidates in my district aren't overridden by the remainder of the council is important. So I'll allow that. Councilmember Davis, your original friendly amendment, now that I've expanded my understanding of that, and so it's an assurance of each district receiving a commissioner, and the only difference is that all of us get to vote on who that is, and so I'm comfortable. Actually, I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Is that okay with the seconder, Councilmember Peralta? Okay, he nodded his head. I think his mic's on mute.
Sorry, yes.
Councilmember Diep?
Sure. I'm listening to the discussion, and I, of course, I'll support this with the amendment. But let me just also kind of make one last pitch. We've been through all this, charter stuff, sending a ballot measure to voters, and of course, each one costs a sizable amount of money because we have to print it on the ballot, and then there has to be arguments for and against and whatnot. We're not doing the mayor thing right this November. So we're saving that. We did incur some cost on the recount for the ballot measure with previously. It's kind of a wash now, but we could potentially still achieve what the council members are discussing here by not going to the ballot and just simply using the magic number of 7. And I just want to raise that up again. And I'm not really pushing for it, but I just want to push it out there for debate. I will support what's on the table here, but being cognizant of our shortfall, and I'm not sure what happened with the state budget saying how much they're going to take back from the city. I think there was a number that the mayor announced a few meetings ago of what, 15 million potentially. I'm not sure if that's still happening or if it was more or less, but I do. Am I buzzing or is there static? Is that me?
I think there's someone else may have a mic on. Other than,
But anyways, so I am cognizant of trying to just scrap and pinch dollars where we can, and if we can achieve the goals that we've outlined in terms of representation and diversity by redrawing the planning commission districts to have 7 that cross-represent different council districts, I still think that's the ideal. But if the will of the council is not there, then that's fine. But I would just like to point out that the argument or the criticism previously of previous iterations of our planning commission that brought us to this very debate, that District 6 was overrepresented. The implication being that the District 6 planning commissioners cared more about bringing resources to District 6 and not so much about the east side or other parts that weren't represented on the commission. I think you don't solve that by adding more planning commissioners that are tied to a geographic district. So if the argument is the District 6 commissioners only cared about District 6, I don't think it's the fix to put on a District 4 council member and a District 8 council member and one from every district that are champions for their district. I do think you need commissioners who are thinking more about the city as a whole. And even that argument, there's the implication that planning commissioners can actually draw resources to different parts of the city. To Councilmember Esparza's point, lack of infrastructure on the east side, using a formula to do planning, that's all true. But that again is not something that I feel that the planning commission addresses and resolves and makes a policy choice to make those changes. That's on us as a council, right? That's on us as a body that represents the entire city. And in my monthly meetings with the planning director, we review plan applications in North San Jose, and I get a sense of that. I am not privy to, I suppose I could ask, but I don't inquire about development happening in Evergreen or in Willow Glen. And the other council members do that, and I'm sure they're not asking about North San Jose. But we need to move towards a more holistic view and not just kind of, for lack of a better word, like a mini mayor or just advocating cheerleading for our respective district. So again, if there's an openness to moving to 7, and I'm not fighting for 7, except that it's already in the charter and it would save us going to a ballot measure and save us some dollars. But I do think we can achieve the goals of equity and representation and diversity without having one commissioner per district, but that's my personal opinion. And of course, I'll support what's on the table. I just wanted to raise that one last time. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate Councilmember Diep's point, as I've articulated before. I would ask, Ed, as the motions are currently formulated, is the assumption that these last 2 items would be a single item before the voters on a single ballot?
We would be combining the 2 together into one ballot measure.
Okay. And then if we really wanted to save some money next week, we could consider whether to further consolidate.
Correct. So on August the 4th, you will do a final vote to determine if these ballot measures, this one and the other 2, will go on the ballot.
Okay. So I just maybe put this out there on the radar. If I don't know how difficult it is for you, Ed and Mark, since you guys are doing the work. Right now, it would appear that assuming this gets approved, we would then have 3 ballot measures going to the ballot. 3 is an unlucky number if you only have enough budget for 2. And I know I expressed previously, I'm not crazy about aligning these, for example, with IPA. But it seems to me if this is all stuff that we think is pretty perfunctory anyway and likely to pass, it's something we could consider. And the question would be then, how hard would it be for us on Tuesday, and more importantly for you, by the deadline, to say, hey, we're going to make 3 ballot measures into 2 ballot measures? Does that work?
Well, we're not going to, yeah. So unfortunately, Mark will be the drafts person on it. It would be great if you could tell us today. I understand you may not be able to, because we do have a very short period after the 4th. We have to have it in final form on the 7th. You need to see what it looks like. So we don't like actually drafting on the dais, the new language of what it would look like combined. And as you all know, there is going to be one question for each ballot measure. And so the question will have to include all of the significant elements of the ballot measure. So going from from 3 questions to 2 questions, I mean, it's all possible. It just makes it much more difficult because of the short term that we have in which to turn around.
And
the actual
just to define what that work is, Ed, it's really around the 75 words, right? Because all the other stuff you can mush together.
Right. So, right. So while, yeah, nothing is easy, but it's easier to squish the ordinances and the charter language together. The 75 word question is the one that we all have a little more difficult time in trying to determine what's the best language that will give the voters an understanding, a true understanding of what it is they're going to be voting on.
I'd like then to, perhaps after this motion is resolved, raise a possibility that we would come back with 2 separate 75 word statements. One that would reflect only one set that would reflect the 2 separate measures, and one that would represent them in a consolidated way so the council could view them both and have some judgment about whether that looks feasible and intelligible to voters. We can take that up after this motion. I just wanted to sort of put that up on the radar for people to consider. Councilmember Esparza.
Thank you. I just wanted to again point out that we voted on this twice in support of having an 11-member planning commission on the ballot. And I agree with Councilmember Davis that I think it's beneficial for all of us to interview and continue that practice of interviewing and voting on planning commissioners. I think it's enlightening for us to go through that process. And I wanted to read from the original memo from the mayor, the vice mayor, Councilmember Carrasco, and myself from April 2019, that it was to direct the city attorney to draft and return to council with a charter amendment for the November 2020 ballot that would align the planning commission to the structure of other council nominated commissions to include 11 members with 1 from each council district and 1 at-large member. And so again, thank you to Councilmember Camus, who reiterated the desire to have 1 from each district. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, on the motion then. This is on Councilmember Rance's motion is amended. Let's vote.
Jimenez,
Yes.
Perales,
Aye.
Yep,
Aye.
Crosco,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Esparza,
Yes.
Arenas,
Aye.
Foley, Camus,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Liccardo.
Aye. All right. Okay, so that is also unanimous. See, 3 unanimous votes. That wasn't so hard. This remaining item, Ed and Mark, let me ask, do you need a motion for us to direct you to draft 2 different sets of 75 words?
Well, we would like direction as to how many ballot measures you want.
Yeah.
To clarify, you already have listed on your August 4th agenda 2 of them, a card room one and an IPA. Today, you have approved moving forward with a ballot measure that has both planning commission and redistricting. We just need direction as to how you want those to appear on the August 4th agenda so that we can draft the question and we can draft the ordinance.
So could I just suggest a motion, if someone were similarly inclined, that we would ask Mark in his ample free time to be willing to draft one 175-word statement that would incorporate the 2 ballot measures that we voted on today, and one that would incorporate within that the IPA measure as well. So then the council could view them and decide whether or not they're sufficiently intelligible and understandable to voters to actually move forward. Would anyone be willing to make
So
that?
moved.
Second.
Thank you. And we might be able to save our city $692,000. That's not a bad thing. Any discussion on that motion? All right, Tony?
Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, it's just to ask our city attorney to draft two different sets of ballot statements. One that would incorporate just the two ballot measures we voted on today, and a second that would incorporate as well the IPA ballot measure, to give us an opportunity to view whether or not that is feasible.
Thank you.
Tony?
Jimenez,
Yes.
Perales,
Aye.
Diep,
Aye.
Crosco,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Esparza,
Yes.
Arenas,
Aye.
Foley,
Aye.
Chemis,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Ricardo.
Aye.
While have the microphone, I have fully absent for the last vote, but did she say aye and I just didn't hear her?
Councilmember Foley?
I'm here and I said aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. All right, we'll go to open forum. Mr. Soto.
Well, this has been Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. This has been an interesting day, a very interesting day. It confounds my mind that Deb Davis has the audacity and the arrogance to continue to try to insert herself. My ancestors had pesticides sprayed on them so that you could be comfortable in that Willow Glen abode that you have. Okay, children's bodies were exploited in Salsipuedes. My parents, both sides, being amongst them. Poison was sprayed on their bodies, and there was also the redlining policies that ensured that they stayed as far away from the house that you reside in,
Mr.
and
Soto,
that has profited from that.
the entire council, not to one council member?
That has profited from that. All right, I'm addressing all of you because this includes all of you, especially you, Ricardo, because you know what? The viciousness in this city's disregard for we start school in September, Ricardo, for one reason. That is so that the children could work in the fields that pesticides were sprayed in order to make profit from that. And then they sent them to school. And you know what happened with my mother and father? They were beaten for speaking Spanish. They were beaten for being Mexican, and they were taught to feel ashamed of being Mexican in this city. And you are sitting comfortably on that wealth. I want my cut. I got it coming. District 6, District 3, that borderline, that's ground central. For Google has a bullseye on it. They have a bullseye. And you know what? As an ancestor, I'm going to die in this city. I have 15 ancestors buried in Oak Hill Cemetery. And you know what? You got a lot of nerve, Deb Davis. Thank you, Councilwoman Esparza and Arenas. Gracias, señoras. Gracias. I am proud and glad that I have women like you protecting this city. A rato.
Hi, good evening. I want to thank Maya Esparza today for calling out the Planning Commission. And I also want to say to Diep, how dare you talk about accountability and then you complain that that had nothing to do with it, that's not a fix. You're kidding. You're sitting in that seat because your constituents put you there. Transparency, don't complain your constituents don't come to these meetings. You should be doing a better job. They're not there because you're not transparent with your constituents like the rest of them are. They're active, proactive, posting because that's what you should do. You're not there because of yourself. So you need to make sure that all your community know. That goes for all council members there that don't post and don't engage with your constituents, because when you post, that's engaging. That's hearing your community. Because when you post, there's comments and you get to read. Not everybody's aligned with you, and that's okay. That's when you have to make a decision, not only for yourself or how you believe and what you think. Yeah, there is a systematic racism. I can see it here in this board. Thank you, Maya Esparza, Magdalena Carrasco, Raul Perales, and Silvia Arenas, because you guys always have the best interest of the community. And that's what you need to do. It might bother you guys, the rest of the board members there, because you don't live it, because you haven't been part of it, because it doesn't affect your area. But yeah, you're there representing that area, but also all of us. You're a board, a body. You're not one vote. There is a systematic racism, and we need the resignation of those 2 police officers. We need them fired. We're not going to give them a desk job for what they did to Guadalupe Marin. I'm going to bring it up again. This is not okay. Shame on you guys for not bringing that up. Ricardo, we need accountability with those police officers. Those cowards need to be out.
Thank you.
Hi, I wanted to thank you for the meeting today. To speak on open forum subjects, I hope that with all the eviction moratorium talk and rent forgiveness issues for owners and tenants, I'm getting the feeling that this December is going to be crunch time. That's going to be the serious crunch time for yourselves. And I felt it was important to give you guys fair warning, or give yourselves warning now of what to expect in December, and start working now to, I suppose, how to move into next year, and just be prepared to protect and save us, basically, work with us so everyone can be safe and protected. Thank you. About the Vietnamese language issue, thank you that you've made the efforts that you are including Vietnamese translation at this time. That's a great feature. I think we all felt a little silly and uncomfortable that it's being said it has to use German on the Zoom, and we're all feeling that's a bit ridiculous. But yet it's a very serious subject, and if we can just address it well, together, I think we can address it, and we can ask for changes with that, and we can simply say Vietnamese on the Zoom app in the future. And finally, just to thank yourselves for your efforts today. I really feel like you're going to have to address the future of planning, and how important is that to ourselves? I don't think it should be that important, but that can be talked about in the negotiation process in the coming months. And thank you for being able to, in these coming months, we can talk about equity and policing, and just really concentrate on the important things that we set ourselves out to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Veronica? Veronica, we're not able to hear you right now. I believe your device is muted.
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Magdalena Esparza and Arenas, and as well as Jimenez and Perales for always advocating for our community, especially the East Side. And then again, you guys talked about equity, and again, it seems like equity is something that we like to sprinkle around, right? It's not something that we are working towards, because if we were working towards it, then how can we invest ourselves in putting the actual representation of our communities out there, right? Supporting the Latinos that are running for office, and those Latinos are grassroots Latinos, right? Not the ones that have that influence already because their mom was a council person before. So I really want to make sure that that gets out there, and really support those that are running within our community, that have been invested in our community. Also want to make sure that we ask for the resignation of Eddie, the chief police officer, Eddie Garcia, or Eduardo Garcia, as he has not done much with the controversy that we just witnessed, right? When I saw that video, it could have been me, it could have been my mom, it could have been my aunt, it could have been my sister, it could have been my friend. It might have not been yours, Sam Licardo, it might have been not Eddie's, but it might have been mine, because you know why? Because I'm a women of color, because the people around me are women of color, because my daughter is a woman of color, and I do not want her growing up seeing that. I do not want her to be fear of the police, but that's all you guys tend to do. You guys tend to put that fear in us. And again, we want that those two police officers and whoever is in command of them to be fired immediately with nothing to give them, because it is just unbelievable the way that they treated a woman of color, and they keep doing it under you, Sam Licardo.
Thank you. Scott Largent?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Scott Largent. Public forum, as you call it, open forum, is our opportunity to address people in power. The public comment belongs to the public. And I find it strange that San Jose tries to restrict what people can say in public comment. Now, if I wanted to talk about the carpet at City Hall, I could talk about that. If I wanted to talk about you, Sam Licardo, I can do that. That's my opportunity to address you. And we can't do it in a civil and peaceful manner because you use us as target practice out on the streets. And when somebody like myself starts actively getting involved in politics, starting to figure out what this crooked regime is up to, you guys file a civil lawsuit against me for millions of dollars. And then you produce a civil injunction to try to stop one person from using a dinky little megaphone that I bought on eBay for 56 bucks. It's not what I'm doing, it's what I'm saying. Okay? I pulled my time waiver yesterday. This will be round 3 with the city coming after me. You guys are gonna crash and burn hard. And I'll tell you something. I'm gonna run Chief Pumpkinhead out of the department, and it's gonna happen. Okay? The community is fed up. You people don't know how to can people. I mean, I could show you how to do it. You need to start firing police officers. None of them are disciplined properly at all. We know IA is just a scam. Please go onto my YouTube channel under Scott Largent and watch internal affairs investigation interviews and watch how they're scamming the public, okay? And I think we're just all fed up of you, Sam. I think it's time to kick rocks. You can't run the city properly. And just do us a favor, okay? Do us a solid.
Thank you, Mr. Largent. Robert Aguirre.
Okay, Robert Aguirre. I'd like to address a looming problem, and that is what will happen when this rent moratorium runs out. And the new estimate now is 50,000 people will become unhoused. And we have the addition of the people that are currently unhoused living wherever they may right now, and they're not getting swept. But I know the city well enough to know that once this pandemic is over, the sweeps will continue. And I think that's a lack of having the foresight to say that these are people that are suffering an unfortunate condition, and there might be some mental illness, there might be some substance abuse that exists out there, but that same sort of thing happens in the house community, and we don't treat them the same way. And I think what we need to do is look at this as a much bigger problem and try to figure out how people can be in a location where they can be safe and secure, how we can provide them with the services that they need with regular trash pickup and water and restrooms and things like that, and quit treating these people as less than human, and understand that people of all colors, all genders, all, you name it, are all subject to the possibility of becoming unhoused. And until we start really addressing this from a big systemic problem and realize that we have not been building the kind of housing that we need to be building, that we're more interested in making money rather than trying to protect people and allowing people to continue to live under these subhuman conditions, and we're not really addressing the real problem, this will continue. And it's, like I said, it's going to be worse when this whole thing ends. So please start planning ahead and let's take care of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Susie?
Hi, this is Susie. First off, I just want to say I hope you guys didn't forget about us the last few weeks because we haven't forgotten about you. We are still here and we are still engaged. We aren't going away. As a D6 resident, I'd like to commend Councilwoman Carrasco for calling out the irony and simply the hypocrisy of the 6 of you wanting to bifurcate the motion today when there was a straight refusal on July 1st. I called in then to voice my disgust with it, and specifically Camus and Davis, and I'm still disgusted. Councilwoman Arenas was nice to even consider it. It's also hilarious to me the change of heart you've all seemed to have had on the strong mayor proposal. As an earlier caller pointed out today, you serve the people and the residents of San Jose. You ignored our voices over 2 days and a 15-hour meeting, and only once you saw organization and corporate opposition did you suddenly decide this was a rushed process. It's sad. I'm looking forward to the D4 and D6 election, and to all residents listening, don't think it doesn't impact you. Just because you don't live in the district, it does impact you and it does matter. If you want change for the city council, please pay attention to these elections happening this November. Thank you.
Thank you. Brenda?
Hi, I want to talk about the pandemic that's going on right now. There's still a lot of people with no food. There's a lot of seniors that are not working and have no food. I want to see something done. There's a lot of people with COVID-19 who are not getting any assistance, who have pets that they need to walk, and there's no services for these people. I'm in the grounds every day, and it's heartbreaking to see how many residents in all of your guys' districts right now are going through a hunger. And a lot of these are our seniors who don't know what to do. We need to do a better job of reaching out to them. We need to do something about the rent. We need a rent freeze. There's no other solution. A lot of our families are desperate. I'm in the grounds and I can tell you this. There's a lot of back pay rent, and a lot of these people are getting desperate, and I do not want them to lose hope and do something stupid because you guys are not figuring out what to do. You're busy arguing about other stuff than what we're really living in this time right now. And then again, I'm gonna bring the systematic racism that our world sees. What would we have? We have been complaining every day about this for so many decades, about how our Black and brown have been subjected by police for decades and decades. And we haven't even fired this guy who was recording. There's no questions. There's nothing that should be done. He was recorded by a dash driver. What more evidence do we need? Do you guys want what happened in Portland to happen here? Why did a police kick her, like, with so much hate and racism? And it breaks my heart because her kids are watching. And I don't know how you would feel if your kids are watching a cop kick you and drag you. There shouldn't be a desk job. The only desk job he should have is in prison for assaulting a mother in front of her children. And we're not going to stop until something is done.
Thank you. Jeremy Taylor?
Thanks. So next year, or what you guys call the Chicano 5, you're going to have one more vote. We know that D4, D6, they won't be won. And the residents here continue to call in and talk about the November vote for a reason. On the number of years for the next mayor, I think we should go with 2, so we actually get to the next presidential cycle. And I'd love to see Raul do those 2 years. If San Jose wants change, we should vote David Cohen for District 4 or Jake Tonkel for D6. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, thank you to all the members of the community who came to speak. The meeting is adjourned.